Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will know my Father also. From now on, you do know him and you have seen him. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father and we'll be satisfied. And Jesus said to him, Have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, Show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. But if you do not, then believe me because of the works themselves. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact will do greater works than these, because I am going to the Father. I will do whatever you ask in my name, so the Father may be glorified in the Son. In my name you ask me for anything, I will do it. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Thanks be to God.
Well, good morning and welcome to church this morning. It's awesome to be able to be continually engaging with one another via this digital format, and it's wonderful to be together on the eve of another announcement. Now this morning, we dive back into the Gospel of John. Last week, Josh spoke to us about Jesus as the Good Shepherd, and this morning we'll be exploring what it means for us today to hear Jesus' claim to be the way, the truth, and the life. Now, for a bit of context, a lot has happened in the Gospel of John since Jesus called himself the Good Shepherd. Lazarus has died and been brought to life. The chief priests and Pharisees have gathered together to plot Jesus' death. And Jesus has washed his disciples' feet. Judas has betrayed him, and now the disciples are gathered round a table on the eve of his death, being told that where Jesus is going, they cannot come yet. So in this morning's reading, in the face of uncertainty, in the face of doubt and confusion, do not let your hearts be troubled. What an encouragement for us to hear. We, like the disciples, sit in this really awkward place of uncertainty, of doubt and confusion about our lives and the future. Level up or level down, returning to relative normality, or extending a form of lockdown. Jesus' words to his disciples are words to encourage them, to remember who they follow. Believe in God. Believe also in me. Jesus draws their attention and ours away from our troubles and onto himself, away from our fear and onto our belief. Another translation for the word belief is trust. You trust in God. Trust also in me. This naturally leads us to question, who do we trust? When stuff hits the fan, when things are going well, where do we go? What do we look to? Do we zone out on Netflix? Do we drink too much? Do we have some me time? Do we do yoga, go running, or back a politician? Where do we put our trust? Jesus tells his disciples to trust him. They have trusted in God, and now they are to trust in him. He is preparing a place for them. He is preparing a place for us. Jesus told his disciples twice that where he was going, they cannot come. We cannot go. But then he adds, I will come again, and where I am, there you may be also. Understandably confused, Thomas voices our own confusion by interrupting Jesus to ask, how can we know the way to where you are going? How can we know the way when we do not know where you go? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus is claiming to be the path for the disciples. He is claiming to be God. He is claiming to be the key to what our world would call well-being, the key to a fullness of life, a steadiness of heart, and an assurance of hope that all will be well. Philip, like many of us with our doubts and our uncertainties, asks Jesus for clarification. Just show us the Father, and then we can be satisfied. Like us, he's hoping for a theophany, a visible manifestation of God. When we hit a fork in the road, we ask, we plead, we get on our knees before God, and we say, turn up visibly. Show us a Moses mountaintop. Send lightning and thunder that we might experience you and see you and make the right decisions. But Jesus rebukes him gently. I already have, he says. My words were not my own. My acts were not my own. They were the Father's. For I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. Jesus is drawing on an expectation that his disciples know the Father, an expectation that the disciples will be linking their prior knowledge of God, to what Jesus is saying and doing. So it's easy for us to judge them. Like our descendants who will look back at this moment in history, they will know the story. They will know the outcome. We know the story. We know what happens next. But the invitation for us this morning is to be present with the uncertainty, like we have in the modern day. Could we have recognized who Jesus was? Would we want to recognize him? Imagine being in such close relationship with God. It's a terrifying and wonderful thought. But today, there is so much on offer that promises us full well-being. There are so many things we can do and buy to fit the well mold. So many distractions to draw us and our attention away from God and call us to trust in something else. At school this week, we took a quick look at what the Bible is. And at its core, it is the unified story of Jesus. It is the only source of our knowledge of Jesus. As my children's Jesus Storybook Bible says, every page whispers his name. For so many of us, reading the Bible or even locating a Bible can be tricky. I mean, it's hard going. It can get lost in our current cultural context. We can read it and feel disconnected and far away. We can hear Jesus' words and we can hear his disciples' responses and we can feel deflated. We are so far away. This was written so long ago. Like Thomas, we can find ourselves saying, how can we know the way, Jesus? How can we know the truth and the life? How can we reach this fullness of well-being? Jesus' words minister to our doubt when he says, I am. Eimi ego, I am Yahweh. I am God. While our world interprets God in all manner of forms, Jesus brings clarity and assurance. You see, in ancient Jewish literature, the word God is Elohim. There are many Elohim, but only one God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his name is Yahweh. When we get to the New Testament, the Greek translators use theos to translate God. Technically, theos is as ambiguous as Elohim, but the New Testament writers never actually use this form of the noun for any God but Yahweh. In their traditional forms, Elohim and theos are impersonal. They simply imply a spiritual being with some power or form. Yahweh is a name. Yahweh is knowable. Jesus says, no one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus is the key to life. We know Yahweh through a personal relationship with Jesus. So what if we take a moment and we reflect on the God we follow? Does it look like Jesus? Sound like Jesus? What if the God we follow is really one of the many gods before us? Personal success, money, power, achievements, technology, individualism, accolades. Like Jesus' disciples, we are invited to come and to sit around the table with him, to prioritize him in our lives and recenter the God that we say that we believe in or trust, and ensure that it is Jesus. Spending time with Jesus, reading the Bible, taking some time alone, intentionally, to pray, bringing our highs and lows before him, being vulnerable and honest, bringing our hopes and dreams. All of this grows our relationship with Jesus. We can feel close. We can know the way when we prioritize this relationship. Relationships, as many of us know, need time. A few years ago, we were driving through the Auckland motorway and there was this great big billboard which said, "What do your kids want most for dinner?" You. They weren't advocating for cannibalism. They were advocating for time. Where do we put our time? This past Lent, I was challenged by my family to give up hurry. I'm that classic mum who's all love and hugs until suddenly I turn on my children and I rush them about and out the door just to ensure I meet my own timeframes. Time is always the thing we have the least of. But the way we use that time fundamentally determines who we are. What we prioritize forms us. We grow with one another and with Jesus when we give quality time to grow the relationship. When we sit with Jesus, we become more like Jesus. I love the line of John the Baptist in the Gospel of John. He says, "I must decrease in order that he may increase." It's this idea of laying down our desires and things to seek Jesus. Jesus is the only way to a relationship with God. There is no other path to full well-being. Jesus reconciles humanity. He reconciles us to the Father. And Jesus is open to reconciling us today. We can come before him with our highs and lows, our failures and our successes, our insecurities, our hopes and our dreams. And he calls us children. He gathers us into the fold. He gives us a life of hope. So how do we take time for Jesus? How do we prioritize our well-being in him? How do we get that life? The easiest way, I've had this explained, and hopefully you'll remember, I think Josh has mentioned this a few times as well, is to imagine Jesus as one of your friends or family members. You naturally spend time with them in your day. You prioritize them over that task or that email, that phone call, or that thing that you've just got to do. Jesus' relationship with his disciples was formed over 3 years. They sat, ate, drank, walked, and yarned with him. And what a beautiful model it is for us to follow. Have a go this week. Grab a coffee, have a bite to eat. Talk over the hardest and murkiest parts of your heart with him. Talk over your hopes and dreams with him. Be vulnerable with him. Don't get me wrong, it can be hard to stop and prioritize something. It can be annoying and get in the way, like COVID messing up all our 2020 plans. But Jesus promises life. He promises that He is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the path to full well-being. And who doesn't want that? So, if Jesus is the way and the truth and the life, if He is the key to our well-being, there is no better time to spend with Him than right now. So why would we wait? Let's take a moment now to pray and to build relationship with Jesus. Jesus, we thank You that You are always willing, that You are always present, and that You are always inviting us into deeper relationship with You. Help us this week to push aside the priorities and the times and the tasks that distract us from growing and knowing You. Help us to place You at the forefront of our day. Help us to recall that Your mercies are new every morning and that growth and change in patterns takes time. Help us to be gracious with ourselves as we seek to know You more. As we grow in knowing You, Jesus, help us to bless those around us with the love with which You have given us. Help us to prioritize those people in our lives that You place on our hearts and on our minds. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Now, you may be aware that this morning is in fact, well, not this morning, the whole day is in fact Mother's Day. So for many of us, we will have a woman in our lives who will have formed us, perhaps in the faith, or has encouraged us at some point. I really invite you today to pull out your phones or your emails or your home landline and to give this woman a call. Take a moment to bless them and encourage them. Just as we spend time with Jesus and are invited to do that, we can actually draw this practice out and bless our wider community. Now, in a moment, we are going to be meeting over in Zoom for a bit of a coffee, so feel free to go and pop the kettle on, and we will join you for a cup of tea or a coffee in our Zoom room in a moment. Bless you all.